What's up, kings and queens? It's Dan from Daft Previews, and I'm back for another comprehensive preview of all the player picks for this upcoming 7-game slate. Now, we had a rough day out in the association. Our plays on Sexton, Fox, Vucevic, and the Jazz total cashed with ease, but no value plays or ladders hit, resulting in a 1.1 unit loss on the day. So stick around to the end for a recap, and I'll share with you the biggest lesson that I learned on the picks that lost. Now, we're continuing into a deep dive with the analysis. I'll be going through all the players who have a good matchup and a bad matchup to help you with your selections, and I'll be sharing 3 bets that I've already placed. As always, I'll be sharing my screen and I'll take you through each player prop and their form lines. I use props.cash to sort through all of this data, and I've got a discount code for all of my viewers. So sign up today and get 25% off your first month by using the code DAFT25 when you sign up. Let's go! We're kicking it off with the Charlotte Hornets versus the San Antonio Spurs. Quite a few players have a great matchup in this one because they can't defend for shit. The very first one, though, is LaMelo Ball, and we're looking at his points line, over 25.5. The San Antonio Spurs allow the most points to point guards over their last 15 games. Looking at LaMelo's form, you can see he's cracked this in 8 of his last 10, and he hit this in both games against the San Antonio Spurs. But one thing to keep in mind for LaMelo Ball is he is recently back from injury. He's only played 3 games since coming back. And I do believe he's also on a minutes restriction as well. But he does make one of my best bets, and I'll talk through why I think he can still cover this line. But another player who's got a great matchup is his backcourt teammate, Terry Rozier. And we're looking at his rebounds, over 4.5. The Spurs allow the 4th most rebounds to shooting guards. Now, looking at his form, hasn't been great. He's covered in 2 of his last 10, averaging 3.7 rebounds. His last matchup against the Spurs, he only had 2 rebounds, but keep in mind the Spurs were up by like 40 points at one point. In his last 2 head-to-head matchups, 2 and 6. So in this game, they lost by about 40. He played limited minutes. Prior to that, he got 6. So definitely something still worth considering. Maybe taking him 4 as part of your parlays. Really up to you. Sticking with the Hornets players, though, we're looking at Miles Bridges, and we're looking at his rebound prop of 8.5. The Spurs allow the 5th most rebounds to power forwards. In his only matchup against the Spurs, he pulled down 9. Looking at his last 10 games, he's only hit this in 2 of 10, averaging 6.6 rebounds per game. But don't be scared when you see numbers just like this. Despite his recent form, not being great, this line is high for a reason because that matchup is excellent. So, look, definitely want to consider. You might want to bring this down for your same game parlays. Really up to you. So he got 9 rebounds in that blowout loss to the Spurs. They lost by 30 points or something. He didn't play he did play quite a few minutes. He was the only starter not impacted by the blowout. But look, 9 rebounds in a blowout loss is still pretty good. This game should be a lot tighter with no Wemby, so the rebound opportunities should be there for Miles Bridges. Jumping into the Spurs players, looking at Jeremy Sohan, and I'm looking at his points and rebounds prop. It's 20.5. So the Hornets allow the 4th fewest points and the fewest rebounds to power forwards. We can see that he's hit this in 1 of his last 10 games. He's only averaging 16.4 points and rebounds. On the season, he's averaging 16.8 points and rebounds. But we know that this line's been moved up because Wemby's not in. So if we remove Wemby from the equation, we can see that, yeah, he does have the potential to hit this. He averages 20.4 points and rebounds without Wemby on the court. But at the same time, Dallas, terrible at defending power forwards. Orlando, I don't know what the hell happened there, to be honest, because Orlando are actually pretty good. And the Denver Nuggets, that was a unexpected one from Sohan. So, look, I would lean to the under in this. He's only hitting this 20% of the time, to be honest. So, but yeah, unders are not fun, so you probably won't take that. But here to share the data with you. Another player on the under, though, is for Devin Vassell. And we're just looking at his points line. I said this when the Charlotte Hornets versus the Pelicans, that I was surprised to see that the Hornets allow the least points to shooting guards. And even though BI torched them, the Hornets still allow the least points to shooting guards. So Devin Vassell scored more than 20.5 points in 5 of his last 10 games. He's averaging 16.9 points per game. Against the Hornets in the 2 games, he scored 11 and 12 points. But what we probably should do with all of these Spurs players is see how much damage does this guy do when Wemby doesn't play. So without Wemby, he's cashed this in 1 of 5 games this year. There he is. 5 games without Wemby, he's only cashed this once. So he does have more scoring opportunities, but it doesn't look like he capitalizes on that when Wemby's not there. So Hornets allow the least points of shooting guards. Devin Vassell doesn't seem to cover this line well at all without Wemby. That might be a great play. Another player I want to look at is Trey Jones. And we're not looking at an under in this one. We're looking at an over in his assist line. So that's 7.5. And that's because the Hornets allow the 8th most assists to point guards. We can see he's only covered this 6 times this year, averaging 5.4. Over his last 10, he's averaging 6.1, but his last 2 games, crazy. 12 assists against the Hawks, 11 assists against the Boston Celtics. So we're seeing a much higher line than what his season averages are. First thing I usually look at is his minutes. He hasn't seen a shift in his minutes. His last 2 games, he played 30 and 26 minutes. On the season, he's averaging 28 minutes. So something has changed depending on how they play or lineup. Something is different here in order to drive this higher assist rate. So until I find out what that is, I wouldn't be playing this. But that piques my interest because it's pretty obvious that something is changing, something's happening. If we have a look at his games without Wemby, check that out. I can't tell you what is going on. So, actually, here we go. 2023. Without Wemby, his assists are terrible. That's what it's telling me. These green bars here, they were last season. So forget about that. This is what you want to be looking at. So Trey Jones without Wemby, not getting many assists. So interesting one. I'll have to look into that one for sure. Let's get into the next game. We're looking at the Philadelphia 76ers versus the Orlando Magic. Tyrese Maxey's come up here, over 25.5 points. Why? Because the Magic allow the 6th most points to point guards. Now, Maxey's covered this in 4 of his last 10 games, averaging 26.6 points per game. He scored 20 plus in all games in his last 10. So if you're looking for something a bit cheaper and you want to play some parlays, Maxey for 20 might be the play. He's got a good matchup and he's hit 20 every single time. But if you're looking at his over, tread carefully because in his last 3 head-to-head matches against the Magic, he scored 8, 10, and 23. That 23 points was this year. The 8 and 10 were last year when he was probably playing off the bench. So I would disregard those if I'm considering it. So once again, another sign that tells me 20 could be a good play to add to your parlays. But the take to 25.5, yeah, not too sure about that one. Kelly Oubre is another one that pops up. It's actually an under on this one. So the Magic are a very good defensive team. They allow the 4th fewest points to shooting guards. He's had some good form against them in the past. Most recent matchup, though, which was this year, only scored 4 points. He is in a lesser role. When he was with the Hornets, he could shoot the ball whenever he wants. Now that he's a Sixer, he can shoot the ball whenever he gets it. The problem is he's not going to get it that much. So looking at his last 10 games, he's hit this in 5 of 10, averaging 13.3. So it's 2 points higher than the line suggests. And the matchup says to go under. So we're probably seeing the 11.5 because the matchup is difficult. So the line you can assume is probably spot on. I'm not a fan of unders, especially with data that looks like this. Let's get on to the next one. Tobias Harris. It's also under 16.5 points. The Magic allow the 6th fewest points to small forwards. He's been playing pretty good lately, Tobias. Covered in 7 of his last 10, averaging 21.4 points per game. Check this out. Head-to-head matchups with Orlando, he's got no fear. He's covered in 4 of his last 5. His lowest total, 16 points. His matchup with them earlier this year, he scored 22. So that's definitely an under that I'm not going to take. So let's jump straight into the next one. Actually, before we get into the next one of the great matchup, Joel Embiid. He's someone you have to look at all the time. But he hasn't covered in his last 2 against the Magic. Obviously, in his last 10, he's been killing it. Do the Magic have anyone that can stop him? No. But the Magic do play at a slower pace. There could be less opportunities. They do have some bigger bodies. They don't allow many assists, so they don't allow many points. So 33.5 for Joel Embiid. I think in most teams in this league, I would take that straight away. Orlando, I'm not too sure. I think I might just sit and watch the Joel Embiid props. But obviously, if you want to take him for 25 points or maybe even 30 points, add it to your parlays. But that's a lot of points to be adding a lot of risk to. So not for me. Heading into the Magic plays, Paolo Banchero. We're looking at his points and his assist line here. Looking at over 31.5 points and assists. So the 76ers, actually, it's not over, it's under 31.5 points and assists. The 76ers allow the least points and the 7th least assists against power forwards. Banchero, he was hitting this line not too long ago to start the year. Franz Wagner's been out, so his usage rate has been up. But I don't know if this is fatigue, difficult matchups, or teams are really planning for him. He's under-delivered against these projections. And for the way that he plays and his usage rate, the line is quite high. He's gone under in 5 straight. In head-to-head matchups against the Philadelphia 76ers, he's hit this once, but other than that, he hasn't really gotten close. So I personally would heavily lead to the under in this one for Banchero. The 76ers have a lot of bodies, not to stop him, but a lot of players that play his position that could potentially give him some problems. So, yeah, I like the under on Banchero. I just don't like betting unders full stop. But I feel like I'm going to have a value play on Banchero. I just need to look into the numbers a little bit better because he's got either a strong matchup when it comes to rebounds. He's got a weak matchup when it comes to his points and assists. So depending on how those lines look, I might fuck around with it and make something juicy. But let's talk about his rebounds for a second. We're looking at over 6.5 rebounds. The 76ers allow the most rebounds to power forwards over the last 15 games. We can see Banchero's covered this in 3 straight games against the Philadelphia 76ers. But over his last 10, he's been a little bit inconsistent. So it's a bit up and it's a bit down. Having a quick scan here, we know that the Knicks don't allow many rebounds to power forwards. The Atlanta Hawks do, so he should have done better in that one. The Minnesota Timberwolves, they don't allow many rebounds to power forwards either. So for the most part, he's been decent or where you would expect him to be. But 6.5, his line's come down. So we can see here his line was hovering around. It got to 8.5 at one point over the last 2 weeks. It's come down to 6.5. So something's changed in the way that they play or the way that he's playing. But yeah, I'm thinking about a value play. I'll put that in a pinned comment or in the community chat for you guys to see. The last one we'd be looking at here is Jalen Suggs, and I'm looking at his points line of 11.5. And I'm looking at it under 11.5. And the reason being, the 76ers allow the least points to point guards over the last 15 games. He's hit this in 5 of his last 10, averaging 13 points per game. 4 matchups against the Philadelphia 76ers, and only covered once. But that one time happened to be earlier this year, and he scorched them for 20 points. To truly understand how that game went, you'd have to go to the box score, watch a little bit of film. This Orlando Magic team has had a lot of injuries, so you don't know who was playing. I don't know if Embiid played that game. We don't know if Fultz played that game. We don't know if Suggs was the shooting guard or if he came off the bench. So there's been a lot of movements. Gary Harris was getting a lot of time once upon a time. So, yeah, before you just take a Jalen Suggs play, if based off this, you've got to look into it. Looking at his last 10, I couldn't tell you if he's going to go over or under or not. So if that sounds like too much effort, just don't make a bet on Jalen Suggs. Let's get straight into the next one because I'm really looking forward to talking about this one. Jumping into the Denver Nuggets versus the Boston Celtics. Man, this is going to be an excellent game. The very first play I want to talk through is Nikola Jokic, and we're looking at over 25.5 points. The Celtics allow the 3rd most points to centers over their last 15 games. The Joker's covered this in 5 of his last 10 games, averaging 22.9 points per game. Looking at his history, 29 and 30 points in his last 2 matchups against the Boston Celtics. So just looking at that, all signs point to yes. The Joker is perfectly capable of scoring 25.5 points whenever he wants. The challenge is sometimes he doesn't want to. He can get a little bit pass happy. He can be a little bit lack aggression, I would say. But looking at his last 10 games, his field goal attempts, he's averaging 12.5. The problem is sometimes he attempts less than 10 field goals. Check this out. Against the Hornets and against the Pistons, which you can see down here, both of those teams have great matchups for him to score a fucking shitload of points, but he didn't shoot the ball. But when it's bigger games, difficult matchups, he tends to get a bit more aggressive with it. He's up against the Boston Celtics today. It's good. I don't know this, but surely it's got to be a nationally televised game. I think the Joker gets tricky with it. He's going to do some wild shit, 30, 40 points, or a crazy triple-double, 20 rebound effort. He's going to do something. The matchups tells us it's points, but let's quickly look at what else is happening here. Rebound-wise, against the Celtics, 8 and 12, nothing too impressive. Assist-wise, 3 and 12. So I don't think he pulls down 20 rebounds. I think he's more likely to crack a 30-point triple-double, perhaps. But yeah, I'm strongly leaning the 25.5 points. To be honest, I'm probably going to take it, and I might have a value play cooking through my mind at the moment, but I'll tackle that after this video. Another player, though, we want to look through is Michael Porter Jr., and we're looking at under 15.5 points for MPJ. And that's because the Celtics allow the least points to small forwards over their last 15. MPJ's form's been good, covered in 6 of his last 10, averaging 16 points per game. Up against the Celtics, he scored 7 and 19. That 19 was in January of last year. So it was 12 months ago. I wouldn't put too much stock into that. But yeah, so they do allow bugger all points, we say here in Australia. But I just don't like betting on MPJ, to be honest, in general. When he just started to break out, he was great. But these days, I find he causes me more pain than joy. He scores when he's not supposed to, and he doesn't score when he should. So moving on. The next one's Contavious Caldwell Pope. And this will be a quick one, but I wanted to share the matchup. So the Celtics allow the 6th most rebounds to shooting guards. KCP's covered in 5 of his last 10. And in head-to-head matchups, his last one he pulled down 3. So probably not worth a mention, that one. I apologize for wasting everyone's fucking time. Next one is for Drew Holiday. And we're looking at his points prop here. Under 13.5 points. The Nuggets allow the 3rd least points to point guards. He scored 20 and 9 in his last 2 matchups against them, but that was last year when he was playing for the Bucks. Looking at his last 10, he scored over 13.5 points 5 times, averaging 13.8 points per game. We're looking at 14.5 as an average in his 2 games against the Nuggets. I think what's interesting with Drew Holiday, we know, if you follow basketball closely, the Celtics have had a few injuries over their past 10 games. So it'd be interesting to see, how does Drew Holiday cover this line? We know if Kristaps plays, if Tatum plays, and if Jaylen Brown plays. So usually when those guys are out, when somebody's out, he steps up. So when all 3 of those are on the court, we can see that he's still covered this in 5 of his last 10. That's interesting. I would have assumed it'd be lower, but 13.5 points, the line seems right. The matchup is difficult for him. Too hard for me to tell right now without diving a little bit further. But the next one we're looking at is Jaylen Brown. We just spoke about him. And we're actually looking at an under for his points and his rebound prop. Under 30.5 points and rebounds. Based on the matchup, the Nuggets allow the 4th least points and the 3rd least rebounds to small forwards. I would not take the under on Jaylen Brown because he's perfectly capable of hitting that. And some, look at that. He's gotten up to 45 points in a few games. So he's hit this in 5 of his last 10, averaging 31. Last 2 matchups against the Nuggets, 33 and 38. So, look, a lot of these great players, the matchup isn't that applicable to them. So, I wouldn't put too much stock into that when you're talking about certain players. Another one, though, and I do like this pick on Kristaps Porzingis. We're actually looking to fade him based off his matchup, and it's to take him for under 7.5 rebounds. The Nuggets allow the 3rd least rebounds to centers. They've got Jokic out there. Jokic handles the ball a lot on offense, so a lot of the time the centers defending him aren't going to be in a position to rebound. He's a great defensive rebounder as well, so Kristaps not going to have much luck on the offensive glass. Looking at his last 10 games, though, check that out. He's covered in 4 of his last 10, but he's gone under in 6 consecutive games, Kristaps. Potentially after the injury, I'm not sure what the reason is, but rebounding not where it used to be. So he's got a difficult matchup. He's had trouble rebounding against Jokic in the past, and his recent form tells us that he's struggling. So keep that one in mind. I do like that as a single play, but that's a little bit juiced if you want to. So it could be something good for your parlays. Move it up to 8.5. I'm not sure. I'll leave that up to you guys. Let's get straight into the next game. We're looking at the Atlanta Hawks versus the Miami Heat. Now, Trae Young is a game time decision today. So there's no markets on Hawks players as yet, but we'll kick it off with Trae Young because he's got a difficult matchup here. The Heat allow the 5th least points to point guard, so that indicates an under 25.5 points for Trae Young. He's covered this line in 4 of 10, so he's gone under 6 times. In his head-to-head matchups with the Heat, he's faced them 7 times over the last 2 years. He's only gone over twice, but those 2 games were his most recent games against them. So maybe he's due to go under. The matchup is difficult. He's clearly facing some sort of injury or illness. I'll leave that up to you guys. The next one is for Kyle Lowry to go over his rebounds and his assist prop. It's only 6.5. The Hawks allow the 7th most rebounds and the 5th most assists to point guards. He's covered this in 3 of 4 games against them, averaging 8.5. In his last 10 games, he's hit it 5 times, averaging 5.8 rebounds and assists. The difficult thing when you're betting on Kyle Lowry are these minutes. He could play close to 30 minutes. He could play 16 minutes. So it's really dependent on whether he gets some game time. So players like that, I tend to avoid unless I know it's going to be a game where they're going to have to get some minutes and opportunities. Someone who will get minutes, though, is this man, Jimmy Butler. We're looking at over 5.5 rebounds. The Hawks allow the third most rebounds to small forwards. Now, he's only covered this in 2 of his last 10, averaging 4.5 rebounds per game. This is another example where you shouldn't be scared of seeing so much red in his recent form. He's got a great matchup today. So obviously that line will be a little bit higher than what he has been producing. If you want to look at his head-to-head matchups, he's averaging 6.8 rebounds against the Hawks in 4 games, but he has covered that in only 2 of 4 games. So perfectly capable of destroying them on the glass, but I said it in a previous video, I ain't touching Jimmy Butler until the playoffs, if they make it. The last one, and I did strongly consider playing this one, but again, I don't like betting on Miami Heat games. But Bam Adebayo, looking at his over in points, the Hawks allow the second most points to centers over the last 15 games. He's hit this in 3 of 7 games against the Hawks. Hasn't consistently done it at all. And looking at his last 10, he does go up and down like a yo-yo. He's covered it 4 times, averaging 21.1. So, look, it's a no from me, but there might be some Heat fans watching this. And if you are, at least you know the players to really look for. Let's get into the next one. We're looking at the Phoenix Suns versus the New Orleans Pelicans. And the first player I want to talk through is CJ McCollum, over 23.5 points and assists. The Suns allow the 5th least points and the second... Sorry, I read the wrong line there. The Suns allow the 3rd most points and the 7th most assists to point guard. So CJ's got a great matchup in this one. I actually love what he's been doing this year. Take a look at this. He's covered this in 6 of his last 10, averaging 25.4. In head-to-head matchups against them, he's covered this in 3 of his last 4 head-to-head matchups against Phoenix. Keeping in mind, that was a Phoenix team that didn't have Kevin Durant in it. But his recent form is great. The Pelicans, though, becoming one of those stacked teams where they have 3 or 4 players who do most of the work. It can be difficult once the lines get high, but I don't think this line's high enough. So CJ does form one of my best bets. Stick around to a little bit later, and I'll deep dive the reason why I'm taking this points and assist prop. But another player, if you like the unders, you'd be looking at Herb Jones. Where's my man, Herb Jones? And we'd be looking at under 14.5 points, rebounds, and assists. Now, he did cover it in his last matchup against the Phoenix Suns, but the Suns allow the 5th least points, the 2nd least rebounds, and the 4th least assists to small forwards. Over his last 10, he's covered this 6 times, averaging 16.4. And obviously that head-to-head, he's got 15. So this is kind of the reverse of the, let's say, the Jimmy Butler graph. A lot of this graph is green, which tells us it's good. But because the matchup's difficult, the line gets moved down. Therefore, his previous hit rates look a lot higher. And that's something that you really need to take into consideration when you look at player props. Just because he's hit it well before doesn't mean he's going to hit it again today, because the matchup is a lot harder. When I see something like that, I tend to stay away. So no play on Herb Jones for me, but you might like that. The next one is for Zion Williamson, and we're looking at under 5.5 rebounds. How many power forwards running around today have a rebound line of 5.5? Well, the Suns allow the 5th least rebounds to power forwards. Zion's covered this in 4 of his last 10, averaging 5.5 rebounds, and in his last 3 matchups against them, he's gone 7, 8, and 3. So he hasn't rebounded very well, and he's got a difficult matchup. But to drop a bit of knowledge, when I present these stats, a good exercise to do is to think about why. So the Phoenix Suns allow one of the better teams at reducing the rebounds that power forwards can get, because the power forward will typically have to defend Kevin Durant, right? If Kevin Durant's working in the perimeter, or he's shooting, taking shots, or taking you off the dribble, you're going to be less likely to get rebounds because you're part of the action, right? In this particular game, even though Zion's the power forward and KD's a power forward, I don't think we see Zion matching up with KD defensively. So if anything, I think he's got a good chance to go over his rebounds. He is a power forward, but I don't think he's going to be defending the power forward at all. I can see him probably sitting in the corner somewhere playing the weak side, and Kevin Durant doesn't play there. He could find himself in Grayson Allen. I'm not too sure, but I highly doubt he defends Kevin Durant. That's all I'm saying. Next one, Jonas Valanciunas. We're looking at under 8.5 rebounds. The Suns allow the least rebounds to centers. I just took Jonas Valanciunas for over on boards against the Charlotte Hornets because that matchup was meant to be easy, and he sucked. The previous game against Dallas, That matchup was meant to be easy, and he sucked then too. So I don't know what's going on with Jonas. Maybe he's getting old, but he's got a difficult matchup today with Nurkic in the middle. The Suns obviously don't allow many rebounds. Looking at head-to-head form, though, he has covered this in 3 of his last 4, but that's Jonas Valanciunas from a year ago. He's a different player now. He's a bit more inconsistent, the bastard. So, yeah, I like the under on Jonas today, but I think that might be me being a bit emotional. So, probably avoid that bet. The next one is for Devin Booker. And we're looking at under 4.5 rebounds for him, and that's because the Pelicans allow the second fewest rebounds to point guards. Now, typically I wouldn't bet on rebounds for point guards, but Devin Booker's form's a bit inconsistent, covered in 4 of 10, averaging 3.8. Head-to-head matchups, he's hit it 2 out of 3 times. So even though the matchup tells us it's going to be difficult, based off these numbers, I wouldn't be able to predict anything confidently on Devin Booker. The next one, Bradley Beal, for the very same reasons. The Pels allow the 3rd fewest rebounds to shooting guards, and Bradley Beal's form line probably looks like Devin Booker's. Yeah, it's unpredictable. So best to avoid both of those. Kevin Durant, he's got a tough matchup in terms of points and assists, but like most star players, you might want to ignore that. But Kevin Durant, 30.5 points and assists is his line. The Pels allow the 3rd fewest rebounds. 3rd fewest points and the 5th fewest assists to power forwards. The problem with that, Kevin Durant has blown them out of the water historically, 34 and 36 against them. In his last 10, you can see he's averaging 30.5. So, yeah, it's going to be a sweaty bet either way. So, probably one that nobody wants to take. You might just want to look at Kevin Durant's points in this one. It's the line's only at 25.5 points. He has averaged 32.5 points against the Pelicans, but the Pelicans do allow the 3rd fewest points to power forwards. So, depends how you want to read that. I personally think he can go over. I would never take, well, that's a lie. I wouldn't say I never would, because I have taken him under and he scorched me. So I've learnt my lesson, and I would never take Kevin Durant for an under again. But yeah, best to not play it or take the over, in my opinion. And then the last one is for Yusuf Nurkic, and we're looking at under 11.5 points because the Pels allow the 6th fewest points to centers. Now, Nurkic is averaging 12.4 points this season. He's covered this in 5 of his last 10, averaging 13.5. His last matchup against the Pelicans, he scored nothing, but he only played 10 minutes, so he must have been injured or something. So, yeah, so very difficult game, that Suns versus Pelicans. The CJ one's obviously the one that I like the most. The others I'm a bit skeptical about. But looking at the other games, there's actually no markets on the Pacers versus Portland, and there's no markets on the Nets versus Lakers either because of some late lineup changes. But don't fear. If you missed the preview on this, I'll still, if there's some good value in those games, I'll still get some bets out. I'm just thinking about how I get these bets out to you. So not every play that I take is going to be in this video. I share every bet that I do make, though, on the Discord. Today, I tried to share it with everybody on YouTube, so I created a community post, but I'm not sure if everyone had visibility to that. So let me know in the comments section the best way to get my final bets out. Do you want me to do the community post and share it all in there with you? Or, I've seen a lot of people do pinned comments. Would you like me to do a pinned comment of what my final bets are? Please let me know in the comment section, and I will cater to you, my boo. Jumping into my best bets. First one that I like, let's talk about CJ McCollum. So CJ McCollum over 23.5 points and assists. Now, CJ has covered this line in 17 of 28 games, averaging 24.8 points and assists per game. His matchup is great, and his scoring efficiency has been excellent this year. But let's do a quick word on the matchup. We know the Suns give up the 3rd most points over the last 15 games to point guards. In recent games, we've seen De'Aaron Fox scorch him for 33, Scoot Henderson scorched him for 33, D'Angelo Russell finished with 19 points. They all smoke their lines against the Phoenix Suns. Now, CJ's had success in his last 2 games against them. He scored 29 and 27 points, although those games were back in December of 2022. But taking a dive into his scoring efficiency and the way that he plays, he's made some major adjustments this season. And a lot of those adjustments, a casual bettor or sports fan probably wouldn't notice. So CJ McCollum's removed a lot of mid-range jumpers off the dribble. He can make difficult shots, but he's really pulled that out. He's not doing that as often as he used to. And instead, he's increasing his attempts from three-point land. He's also creating less of his own shots, and he's instead allowing Brandon Ingram and Zion to create shots for him. So last year, he shot 46% on assisted field goals. This season, he's up over 56% on assisted field goals. His 3-point shooting percentage will get you mildly erect. So get the tissues out, boys and girls. There are 28 players in this league who average at least 7 3-point attempts per game, which includes McCollum. But none of those players are averaging a higher 3-point percentage than CJ McCollum this year. He's shooting 44.3%. Now, the Pels don't have many shooters in their starting lineup, so CJ's role is crucial for their success. Zion is always going to draw defenders into the paint, whilst BI works defenders off the high post. When that ball gets kicked out and it rotates around the perimeter, it's going to be CJ taking that shot more often than not. Now, it wouldn't be a Daft preview if you didn't have a value play in the mix. So I'm putting a quarter of a unit on CJ to ball out to this stat line. I'm taking him for 20 points, 3 rebounds, and 7 assists. Now, I got that for $8.50 on Bet365. That's plus $7.50 for those of you in the US. Cross your fingers and cross your toes. Let's get it, CJ. My next pick is on LaMelo Ball. I do like his over 25.5 points. So he's covered this in 10 of 18 games so far this season. He's averaging 24.9 points per game. As discussed, he's got an excellent matchup up against the San Antonio Spurs, who allow the most points to point guards. LaMelo's also performed very well against him in the past. In his past 2 games against the Spurs, LaMelo has scored 28 points both times. He's 3 games back from his injury, and it appears he does have some types of minutes restriction. In his 3 games back, he's played 26, 30, and 31 minutes. He was averaging 34 minutes per game prior to his injury, but that's also why we see a lower line despite the great matchup against the Spurs. Look, I've looked into it, and despite his reduced minutes since his return, his activity on the court has been amazing. He's taken 14, 24, and 19 shots in his 3 games since he's returned. In the game where he attempted 14 shots, he got to the free throw line 16 times. That means he would have attempted at least 8 shots there, which would have taken his free throw attempts over 20. I mean, not free throw, his total attempts over 20. So he's still not shy to let it go from deep. He's averaging more than 10 3-point attempts so far in those 3 games. And despite what you might see in the highlights with his flashy assists, LaMelo Ball is a shoot first point guard, and he's never seen a shot that he didn't like. He's shot under 40% in all games since his return, and he's covered this line twice. With no Wemby patrolling the paint, scoring just got a little bit easier for LaMelo. So I'm looking for LaMelo to jack up a lot of shots here. The Hornets just lost to the Spurs not too long ago, like 30, 40 points. So is redemption on their mind? I don't think they're capable of driving themselves that hard, but I do think they keep this game a lot closer than the last one. And if they do, LaMelo is going to have plenty more opportunities. So let's go LaMelo Ball. Let's hit that over in points, my boy. We are not done. Here, let's get straight into the recap, and let me share with you the biggest lesson that I learned today off my losing plays. Jumping into bet analytics here, and what do we see? We're still 60.2 units ahead. We've still got a 12+% return on your investment. So the goal for me is to keep that above 10%. So we're looking at 12%, so that's looking good. Doing a dive into all the bloody plays I had today, there was a lot of them, and God, it was painful. But Colin Sexton, we did a deep dive into that one. That cashed easy. I wished I would have laddered that. We had Vince Williams. We had 2 plays, a value play and a points and rebounds play. I think he finished on 17 points and rebounds. He didn't shoot the ball as often as I thought. He got a lot more assists than I thought he would. But the thing I failed to consider in that game is that he'd be picking up Anthony Edwards. So his core focus was defense in that game. In attack, he didn't do too much to help us. Julius Randle. Look, I'll save the Julius Randle pick for a little bit later. Nick Vucevic, I took his over in assists. That cashed easy. That was $2.40. I wish I would have laddered him because I think he finished on 7 assists or something. So that was heartbreaking for me there. I took a value play on Vucevic. I took his under in points. I was leaning overs, took his under, and that killed the bet because he got the rebounds and he got the assists nice and easy. That could have been another 8 to 10 units. De'Aaron Fox, I took his under. That one cashed with ease, and that was purely based on matchup and his previous form. Scotty Barnes, he killed me on this value play here because he didn't get close to the rebounds and he smashed his points line. I don't know what was going on there. So total misread for me. I honestly just fucked that one up. Rudy Gobert struggled to rebound, had 2 or 3 rebounds at halftime. Managed to pull down like 6 rebounds in the fourth quarter, but he still finished on 10, so that killed us. And I laddered him up to 17 and 20 with no success. And then the last one, I put 2 units on the Utah Jazz to score over 121.5 points on that cash. So I guess if you are still listening and watching, my biggest learning of the day, to be honest, the biggest thing that screwed me over today is after I set on my plays last night, posted the majority of them, told them what I'm getting on. I usually spend the morning watching a lot of YouTube content to see what everybody else is doing. And sometimes some of these content creators are so bloody good. I watch and I listen to their reasoning and I think, shit, that guy's got a really good point. So then I jump in and I do my own research on the player and everything adds up. And I'm like, that's a great pick. So then I get influenced to make these bets that it didn't initially show up on my radar. And honestly, a lot of these times it kills me and I hate it because I know at the end of the day, it's my final decision. I choose to make the bet. I still did the research and researched it and shared it, but obviously influenced. And when those things don't pay off, it's an absolute kick in the gut. So the one thing that I'm going to commit to doing is I'll still watch those other creators because I think they're really good. I honestly love them to death, but it's not going to influence any of my plays moving forward. I can tell you that. But that was my biggest learning of the day. We'll be back again tomorrow, kicking off the weekend. But hopefully we can kick off the weekend with some profit. So let me know in the comment section, do you want me to pin my final bets or do you want me to put a community post so you can see them all there? You let me know and I'll make it happen. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Thank you so much for watching. Peace.
Sub to the channel because your boy's getting busy. Coming to your line from the west side of Sydney. We've got the free picks and the juice on the daily. It's all free, you don't even have to pay me.